Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. Good to have you along on this Thursday. We are going to talk Prop 203, the medical marijuana law, which was passed by voters this past November. That was a bizarre vote, how it was behind just a couple thousand votes day after day, and then all of a sudden it passed by over 3,000 votes by the end. So in studio with Jack Fields with the Yavapai County Attorney's Office is in studio, and he's going to kind of shed some light as far as to where we're at right now with the medical marijuana law. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good. Good to see you today.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming down. Let's start off right away because there's a lot to talk about. Medical marijuana law, where are we at right now with it?
Well, right now, the Department of Health Services published an informal draft of rules that they solicited comments on. Comments were due by January 7th. So now what the Department of Health Services is doing is putting together a formal draft of rules, if you will. Mm-hmm. They will issue those on January 31st. At that point, the public will have until February 18th to comment on those rules. The Department of Health Services will have some public meetings on the 14th, I believe, of February in Flagstaff, on the 15th of February in Phoenix, on the 16th of February in Tucson, and on the 17th of February back in Phoenix again. So they're going to solicit comments for these formal draft. After that, they will put together the final draft of rules that will include the rules about issuing registration cards and the operation of dispensaries. They're looking at April 13th to begin accepting applications for the issuance of registration cards. So it's happening lightning fast.
Okay, so registration cards, now the dispensaries are going to have rules, of course, that they're going to have to follow. And then you've got people who are going to be growing it. They're going to have rules that they have to follow. And then there are rules for the people who want to use the medical marijuana.
Well, the growing, let's start with the growing first, because people are going to be allowed to grow if they don't live within 25 miles of a dispensary. There's an interesting gap of time between the registration cards being issued. They have to issue the registration cards or at least give a decision within 10 days after the application versus the dispensaries, which is a 90-day gap. So it's possible for registration cards to be issued without a dispensary out there at the very beginning. But again, the person, a registration card holder, has to have permission to grow. And the way they get permission is they have to show that they do not live within 25 miles of a dispensary. So not everyone who has a registration card is automatically going to be allowed to grow. The same thing goes with caregivers. The caregivers can derive the ability to grow from the patient. If their patient doesn't live within 25 miles of a dispensary, then the caregiver could potentially be allowed to grow as well.
Would you guys rather see dispensaries as opposed to grow operations?
There's kind of a split of opinion in the state. We are very strong on dispensaries. We would like to see, we refer to this 25-mile limit as halos, and we would actually like to see the state covered with halos. Under this theory, a dispensary, by the initiative and by regulation, we think, is going to be tightly controlled. They're going to have security cameras. They're going to have inventory control of the marijuana that they grow or acquire. And we think it'd be a lot easier to keep track of what they're doing rather than to have a whole bunch of individual grows out there because we think that could lead to very easily to an underground market in marijuana.
Dispensaries are going to have to get their product. So who's going to grow their product?
That's another interesting question. The draft rules from the Department of Health Services indicated that the dispensaries would have to grow at least 70% of their own marijuana. So that's kind of how the Department of Health Services is looking at it. They can exchange marijuana with registered patients, with caregivers, and with other dispensaries as long as there's not an exchange of money, as long as there's no profit made from it. That's in the initiative as well.
Is it looking as if, okay, if I own a dispensary, am I growing it just out the back door of the dispensary, or am I growing it in my backyard at home, or?
We've taken the position that if the dispensary can grow on site, under the dispensary certification. But if you want to grow at a separate location, we believe the initiative says that you have to have a second dispensary certification. In other words, the grow operation itself is defined as a dispensary. Now, the Department of Health Services, there's a little quirk in the initiative that seems to say, well, each dispensary can have an off-site grow location. So that was one of the comments that Matt Force and the County Attorney's Office made to the Department of Health Services. No, you need to have an off-site location. They need a separate certification. We'll see what Department of Health Services comes up with.
Are there going to be limits on how big of a grow operation you can have? Can I only have, say, this many plants growing, or can I have a whole field and then say, well, I'm supplying to dispensaries all across the state?
We don't know the answer to those questions yet. There are some entrepreneurs out there who are saying we want to put together a 10,000, 15,000 square foot grow operation, indoor or outdoor grow operation. There are other dispensary applicants or potential applicants who are saying we want to grow on site and it's going to be a very small operation. Nobody really knows how this is going to play out. So, and the initiative, neither the initiative or the rules really address that question very well.
Okay. Now this is, I downloaded this morning and printed it off. This is the draft, and it says right on the front, this is the draft. Now, nothing we're talking about today is firm and set in stone yet.
That's correct.
Because this is just a proposal right now.
This is the informal draft. What's coming next is a formal draft. This is the comment period for what you've got is already passed.
It's gone.
It's gone. But the public will have, the people will have another chance to comment when the formal drafts comes out on January 31st.
Okay, so if they go to adhs.gov, that's where I went for this. If you go to that website right now, you can download this and take a look at what it says. I started looking at it, and it's difficult to look at. It's huge, it's massive, and most of it I really honestly couldn't understand. So I came up with my own questions out of my own head. Okay, this is what my concerns are. Let's talk about this if we can. Who qualifies as a patient that can use medical marijuana? Because I've heard all kinds of stories. I have scoliosis. So I have back pain on a regular basis. Does that mean I can get a medical marijuana card because I've got some back pain every now and again?
The qualification really comes down to two different types of conditions. The first deals with the actual condition you have. There's a list, a laundry list in the initiative. People with ALS, which is also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, or who have AIDS, or surprisingly who are HIV positive. And if you've ever had contact with people who are HIV positive, some of them are healthier than you and I. So specific conditions are covered. The other thing that's covered are symptoms. If you have a debilitating condition that gives you severe and chronic pain or wasting disease or those kinds of things, then you would qualify as well. You need a certification from your physician. Notice it's not a prescription, it's a certification, and there's a legal reason.
What's the difference
that.
there?
A prescription is something that the doctor writes for a controlled substance under federal law. If they prescribe marijuana, that's a violation of federal law, and they will lose their ability to prescribe other medications such as painkillers or even cough syrup with codeine, those kinds of things.
Okay.
That's why the initiative was written with the word certification.
So a doctor would write you a certification?
Correct.
And then you'd have to go out. How does this process work then? Okay, I've got this from my doctor now. And let's say I really do have chronic pain, and I think medical marijuana is going to help. I don't know it will help, but I think it will. What do I do next? How do I get a card that says this is okay for me to do?
Once the rules are in place, once the procedure's in place after April 13th, you submit an application to the Department of Health Services with the certification. There's other things you have to list, name, address, where you live. The Department of Health Services has 10 days to review the application. If they approve it, they will issue you a card. If you are asking to grow marijuana, you also have to indicate where you live, and they will make a determination if there's a dispensary within 25 miles. The proposed rules say that the card will indicate whether you're allowed to grow or not. But it's a fairly simple process. Once you got the certification, you submit your application, DHS looks at it, and you could be legal to possess medical marijuana within the space of a couple of weeks.
Wow. Okay, we have to take our first break. Countywide will be back in just a couple of minutes. Jack Fields with the Yavapai County Attorney's Office in studio. I'm Paul David. Stick around. We'll be back in just a short bit.